It's time for Atomic Monsoon with your hosts, Psycho Andy,
The best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be.
Josh,
It doesn't matter what your name is!
and Jedi Stephanie.
Oh, yeah!
And now, it's Atomic Monsoon. Hey everybody, welcome to Atomic Monsoon. This is Andy, and I'm all by myself. Well, I would be all by myself. Stephanie had some stuff going on this week, and so I thought, well, we could either not have an episode, or I could call a friend. So I called my buddy, Robert Clarke-Chan, of Knowing Is Half the Podcast and AE Doubleback, and he agreed to come talk with me today about professional wrestling, which Stephanie never wants to talk about. What's going on, Chan?
I'm usually on the other end of this, so I wanted to give you the space to do an intro as you would normally. But if this were my podcast, about 30 seconds ago, I would have immediately jumped in with, all by myself, don't want to be all by myself anymore. Okay, I feel good. I feel better. I got that out of my system.
Okay. I did consider that, and I thought I just don't want to record myself crying by accident. So
No, I feel you. I have been told that that my voice makes people cry.
that is not what I meant at all.
No. But it was. It was.
I mean, all right.
It's not going to stop me. Just so you know.
Oh no! Please
I
don't
will-
stop. I mean, at some point, stop singing because I don't want to have the record industry hitting me up for royalties. But
Yeah, this is gonna get DMCA'd real quick.
listen, there's some things we've done on this show that I'm kind of surprised we haven't already. So Chan, you, I was actually just on Knowing Is Half the Podcast a couple weeks ago.
Indeed, you were
as
a
part of
fine
your-
guest.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, as part of your theme song throwdown. Although I haven't been on an episode proper yet, we should work on making that
Yes.
happen.
I tell you what, Ray and I are definitely into having guests on. Gina, not so much. She's
Interesting.
She's a quiet, introspective soul. Doesn't make friends easily. So
Gina Ippolito, who we had here on Atomic Monsoon back in March.
Mhm.
Mhm,
Yeah, she
mhm.
may have seemed friendly, but I tell you, oh my God, behind the scenes, she's a monster, absolute monster.
Okay. I will.
Don't tell her I said that, please. Dear God,
I mean, I won't tell her. I can't promise she won't listen to this.
I can promise that.
Fair enough.
She doesn't listen to our stuff. She doesn't listen to stuff she's on. That woman works.
That's
Look,
true. That's
We're all
true.
sitting around gabbing. She's off in a Zoom room somewhere writing network comedies.
If only we could all be so lucky, right?
I guess.
I don't know. I mean, listen, she's getting paid to talk on Zoom in her pajamas all day. Although
There is that.
I don't know what you're wearing, but maybe I'm sitting here not.
Look, I wear jorts and a Hawaiian shirt literally every day of for the past, let's say, 10 years. It's been pretty much that all the way through.
Man, if you can rock that, more power. That's fantastic. More power to
You know what? No one's ever said that I've rocked it, but in my head, I'm rocking it.
I mean, I've been black t-shirt and blue jeans since about 1998. So,
Nice. Yeah.
yeah.
I switched over basically from that to this a while back, mostly because like having that front pocket, oh my God, you can put so many things in there.
That's very true. That's
When
very
I do
true.
wear a pocketless shirt, I keep reaching, trying to put stuff into my nipples, and it's an ugly sight.
So we're almost 5 minutes in. And we haven't said a single word about professional wrestling.
This is, I don't know if you've listened to Knowing Is Half the Podcast. Or
I mean,
there's definitely stuff you haven't heard, because routinely we've talked for an hour and a half before starting a podcast. From the moment I hit record to say like, okay, let's go. And then we just start talking, and like, we never.
I'm not going to say that Stephanie and I have never done that before, or that maybe we will talk for an extra like 2 or 3 hours after we're done recording. Especially now that it's a pandemic and I only see my roommate and she only sees her husband. But yeah.
If you're listening to this podcast, start your own podcast. It's wonderful. So many podcasts that I've had, I just did it because I wanted to hang out with my friends.
Yeah.
and it's a great way to do it.
Yeah. 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 And then your conversations are on record. And
Hmm.
you can always prove to someone that, yeah, no, you did say this 6 years ago because look, we have the recording.
Oh my God, that's so much power. I don't know if I can handle it.
So, in addition to knowing it's half the podcast, you also host the AE Doubleback Dynamite Wrestling Recap Show, or whatever the
Yes,
full proper
indeed.
title is. Um, so clearly, and before that show is an evolution of the old Raw
WW
recap.
recap.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So clearly, you've been a wrestling fan for a while.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Since I was a kid, back when my mother would not let me watch and I had to sneak my wrestling in.
Oh, please tell me more about that.
I mean, there's not much. It's an 8-year-old kid who's like turning on the TV when he's not supposed to, just to watch professional wrestling, which is sad. It is real. Chubby little Robert Clarke-Chan. Just it's watching steroided dudes and speedos punch each other. Fake. That's
Yeah,
not. That's not something you want to tell your grandkids about.
and
I'm not
yet,
greatest generation. This is the saddest generation.
oh,
But yeah, like as a kid, it was. I mean, they're superheroes. That's what I
right.
should say. That was my first experience with wrestling in the mid '80s with Vince McMahon's WWF, which
Mhm.
is a specific kind of wrestling. There's a lot of different kinds of wrestling in the same way there's a lot of different kinds of music, and like not
Right.
everybody is going to be real into hip hop or country or new metal,
Hmm. Hmm.
and but this it is the most successful and fabulously powerful wrestling organization in the world, so
Right.
they're doing
Right.
something right.
I mean, WWE would be the pop music of professional wrestling then, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And back then, like, he decided, like, I'm gonna get kids, I'm gonna turn this thing that used to be like people would watch it seriously as a sport. Like in the 50s, like they took
Right.
this business like people would get stabbed, like bad guys would get stabbed
Oh, yeah.
because fans were so incensed at the things they did. So by the 80s, it's like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna hook up with MTV with Cyndi Lauper. I'm gonna have a cartoon. Hulk Hogan's Rock and Wrestling is one of the worst things you can imagine putting into your eyeballs. And Hulk Hogan is voiced by Ray Romano. Not Ray Romano.
No, Brad Garrett.
Brad Garrett. It was his first gig in Hollywood, I believe. Yeah, from Everybody Loves Raymond. And
Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
Ray's older brother, Robert. Yeah.
that blew my
The
mind
voice
when
of
I
Hulk
first
Hogan.
heard it.
I yeah, when I learned that it was Brad Garrett, I was like, "Is it?" And I went back and listened to more of the cartoon, and I was like, "Yeah, yeah, that is definitely not Hulk Hogan, and it is definitely. I mean, it's him not doing the Robert voice, but like that's definitely the same guy."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm. And you'd think to yourself, like, the WWF made this show. They have the wrestlers. Why wouldn't they just have the wrestlers do their own voices?
which yeah, that would make a lot of sense. Except then you realize, like, oh, except it was the '80s, and record you couldn't just bring your iPhone with you to record the voices, right? Like there weren't like portable recording studios. So although I guess it was the WWF, and they were bringing those cameras with them from town to town to shoot all the promos. So never mind.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They absolutely could have done
they
it.
absolutely could
The
have.
reason why I guarantee you they didn't, because one of the high points of my life was several years back. Oh gosh, probably almost 10 years now. I was doing a sketch show in Los Angeles at the Second City Hollywood,
Mhm.
and we got Roddy Piper as a guest. He was a
Mm,
guest on our sketch show. I wrote a sketch for him. I got to perform in that sketch with him. Roddy Piper is one of my idols, like
mhm,
just
mhm.
just a fabulously wonderful and amazing entertainer, performer. It's just such a seminal person in my pantheon. And he was terrible at the job of being a sketch comedian. Like he couldn't remember a line, and I had to end up rewriting the sketch where basically I took all of his lines and then he just sort of like responded.
Okay,
And it was fabulous. It was amazing. It is an amazing show. He is still amazing, but like
sure.
wrestlers by and large are really good at what they do and kind of nothing else. So like I'm
Yeah,
sure at some point it was like, oh yeah, I could just get Hulk Hogan in there and do his own voice, and Hulk was probably like, man, this what,
let me
brother.
tell you something, brother. Why would he say brother here, brother? Yeah, yeah,
So yeah, I get it. I get it.
yeah, yeah. So the mid '80s rock and wrestling era was your introduction to pro wrestling?
Yeah, it was. Like, the
Okay.
biggest thing I remember was when Randy Savage, Macho Man Randy Savage,
Mhm.
crushed Ricky Steamboat's windpipe. And, like,
Oh boy.
here again, as a kid growing up in the '80s, the number of Asians that you can find in televisions and movies,
Oh yeah,
super limited.
yeah,
Basically, you
yeah,
have kung fu movies and kinda that's it.
yeah,
Kung fu
yeah.
movies, Godzilla movies, like basically imports. There's nobody
Mhm,
on
mhm.
television. There's like one character on Happy Days, you know. So like
Right.
when I saw Ricky Steamboat, I'm like, oh my, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Yeah, that's my guy.
Yeah,
He's Hawaiian, but yeah, like, of largely
yeah,
Asian descent.
yeah.
And yeah, and when Savage crushed his windpipe, air quotes obviously, it was
Right, right.
but it was
It's
like I'm like, "Oh my god, this what have you done?" And I didn't get to see the blow off pay-per-view match until years later on videotape or whatever.
sure.
Because yeah, back in the day, an 8-year-old kid is not gonna have, I don't know, was 20-30 bucks for a pay-per-view.
Right.
So
Yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah.
but it was yeah, that was, like, huge for me and, like, got me so invested, in, like, these stories of, big sweaty dudes punching each other, which, it's not for everybody, but
No.
it's I mean, it's all of the investment you get from, sports. Like, if you're, watching sports, you're like, "Oh, yeah, our team got a goal," and most people can at least identify with that if,
Right.
maybe they're not a huge football fan or a hockey fan or whatever. But, like, that emotional investment, but because they can tell stories, then you don't ever or in theory, you don't have the real disappointing matches where there's a blowout, somebody gets an injury, and like this kind of sucked, and you're just sitting around going, oh well, that was a real letdown. You
It's
can
true. Like,
write it so it's always going to be rooting
yeah.
for the guy, and then they win, hooray!
Right. I've had this conversation with a lot of friends who like the UFC and the MMA and everything, and they're like, "Oh, I'm gonna get this fight. Do you want to come? Do you want to pitch in?" And I'm always like, "No," because a, like as violent as wrestling can be, it's all like at least WWE stuff is all kind of cartoony violence,
Right,
and like I know that these guys are going to be back and having a match the next night, whereas
right.
like boxers and mixed martial artists and stuff, they're all having 2 or 3 matches a year tops,
Hmm. Yeah.
and they're actually injuring each other, and like I don't know, call me a pacifist, but like I don't want to watch people actually injure each other. I want the stage choreography. The other thing is, you pay 50, 60, 70, 100 bucks, whatever, for these pay-per-views. Some of those main events are over in 45 seconds. Like
Yeah.
you're paying, $3 a second for some of these fights. And, pro wrestling, that main event's always going to be at least 10 minutes. Now, in some cases that 10 minutes is going to include entrances, Goldberg, but at least, and then the undercard is always going to have some good matches too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm more in favor of the choreography and the staged violence than the actual thing, simply to get my money's worth out of it.
And there's like I'm saying, there's an enormous variety of styles of
Yeah,
wrestling. Because
yeah,
yeah, on the WWE end, you have stuff that is cartoony and like they in the around 2000 or so, maybe a little bit earlier, Vince McMahon decided that he wanted to become like the biggest television show, period. Not
right,
just the best wrestling show or the biggest wrestling show. He wanted to like be as big as NCIS or Keeping Up with the Kardashians or whatever. And so the
right,
product became very influenced by television, like drama and reality shows. They actually have a fairly decent crop of reality shows where we're blurring this line between the character and the person. And one of the really fun things about pro wrestling these days is that there is this strange mix and crossover of what is real and what is not real in a business that was built on fakery.
yeah, yeah,
They've done it in this new weird way that sometimes hits, sometimes doesn't, but I mean, in terms of it's an interesting art form and an expression of the human experience.
agreed, yeah. Yeah. So okay, so different WWE has their pop music, their kind of cartoony violence.
Mm.
You are the host of the AE Doubleback. So how would you compare AEW's wrestling to WWE's then?
AEW basically takes old Southern wrestling,
Okay.
the old territory days. Like I said, like back in the 50s, people took this stuff seriously. By about the 70s, in the late 70s, kind of early 80s, Southern wrestling, territory wrestling, when there used to be a bunch of small promotions.
Mhm.
There was the NWA that was sort of an umbrella organization over a lot of small territories in a lot of different states. A wrestler could, like work in a territory. They could work in, Ohio and become real big, and like if he's a heel, he could like work this program where he's gonna take down the top guy. He gets beaten, and then kind of like, oh well, he's just not as good as the hero or whatever. Then he could go to another town and do
Mhm.
the whole thing again and
Mhm.
build
Mhm.
himself up as this monster heel or whatever, and get beaten, like make a lot of money, and then move on and do the same shtick all over the place. So
Right. And because everything was localized to, your state or just even your major market, right? Your like your upstate New York, I mean, I guess New England's not the best case, but your Northern California, your Southern California
mhm.
are not necessarily going to be the same fans going to every show.
Yeah,
So,
because
if you're
there's not a whole lot of television. There's some, but
right.
a lot of it is people going to this live show, and there's some newsletters, but not a
Sure.
lot. So like
Right.
you're not actually, you don't know what's going on over there. So they could do the same thing over and over again,
Right.
and
Yeah, and you can
and
have this
really,
whole career where
yeah, and,
you only do the same 4 things over and over again.
mhm.
And
And you hone it so that you're the best at this character that you've created, and then you
right.
can do the same thing over and over again. Like, and it works.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and so like a lot of that is sort of much more grounded than this cartoony style of like WWE.
Sure.
They're basically selling you on the idea that this person is genuinely upset at this other person, or this person is genuinely going to beat them up for money. That's the
Mhm.
job of a boxer, or a combat person or whatever. Like
Right.
you're gonna put on a show and beat the crap out of this person because that's what you do to make a living. That's what you're good at. And so AEW manages to do that in a modern way. They're
Okay. Okay.
they're just really good at sort of doing that bare bones, like, this is what I do. I'm good at what I do. We're gonna fight because I just have to prove that I'm that good. Or like, you knocked me over backstage. You were a real jerk to me, and so now I want to fight you because I am really mad at you. Or even a more involved storyline like Eddie Kingston and John Moxley. Like, we've been on the indie circuit for 20 years, man, and then you sold out to the WWE, and now you're here, and I'm gonna teach you a lesson. And people, a lot of these wrestlers who have worked the indie circuits, for so long,
Mhm.
worked in these house shows and just to a crowd of 300 people. They have the skill to basically, like any stage performer, like, I'm
Sure.
going to make you believe what I'm saying, even if it's a French drawing room drama. Someone is, or like if someone's playing Tartuffe, a really good actor will draw you in, make you want to watch them. And so, yeah,
Mhm.
these people are doing it in a very specific way, and AEW does a really good job of conveying that kind of emotion that WWE really doesn't.
Yeah, I would say that that's pretty true. Yeah, yeah. I also, one of the things that I've noticed about AEW is like you said, a lot of these guys have been on the indie circuits for a long time, and they've really gotten the chance to own these characters and hone these characters.
Hmm.
And when these guys get signed to WWE, it seems like the WWE
Hmm.
creative team, their writing staff, as it were, who
Hmm.
are, from what I can tell, mostly people that kind of failed in Hollywood.
Not necessarily. I mean, I
I
will say
mean,
that I know a handful of people who have worked for WWE as
okay,
writers, a lot of
okay,
comedy people. And
that
it's not that
tracks.
they're like not successful. It's just
Okay,
that the business is really diverse, and there's a lot of jobs you can have, and a lot of, even, you
okay,
could work on the biggest show in television, like Two and a Half Men or whatever.
sure,
And eventually that job is over. You got to do
okay,
something else.
okay,
And
fair
those
enough.
jobs that you get before then, all leading up to your big job or whatever, it's like all sorts of crazy stuff. So like, yeah, what that is to say that it's not that they're failed writers or bad writers or anything like that. When WWE goes wrong, it's almost always the fault of Vince McMahon, who has a very specific view of what he wants out of his product. which is,
Right.
again, not necessarily a good or a bad thing, but he has an idea, and for better or for worse, kind of like Saturday Night Live,
Mm.
it's real successful.
Mhm. Mhm.
And they make bad creative choices constantly. I would argue 95% of the time in both SNL and WWE, but it's still successful. So, like, when someone has a really good idea, I'm like, oh, I have a way to, get this wrestler over. I like to tell a real interesting story. It's entirely possible that Vince says no, because that's not what we do. And
Okay. Fair enough. Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, and to a certain point, there's always, in the same way that there's different styles of wrestling, you need different styles of wrestling show, right? Like,
mhm.
and I don't mean to characterize the audience, but WWE is for your intro level wrestling fan, right? Like, this is your easiest to get a hold of thing.
Yeah.
In the same way that there are sitcoms that are Two and a Half Men or Big Bang Theory that are really successful, but people who have been watching a lot of TV or write comedy or whatever kind of look down on those shows
Yes.
and then are drawn to, like, Community or The Good Place or kind of those higher concept shows.
Yep.
But you need those introductory sitcoms or wrestling shows, because it's going to be someone's first show, right? someone
Absolutely. Yeah.
someone has never seen all these hackneyed jokes before because they've never watched these kinds of shows.
Yeah. 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 One of the things I like about AEW is that
Yeah.
within a given show, it feels like there are 4 or 5 different shows, where
Yeah, that's very
WWE
true.
has their one product. Again, like, it is Vince's vision. In AEW, they allow wrestlers the opportunity to take control of their own thing, and so you have people who really excel at comedy, and you have people that really excel at the, just the hard driving, like, I'm a badass kind of thing,
Mhm.
and all these gradations in between, and they bounce around. Like, there was a musical number on AEW about a month ago that they just played straight, and it was kind of terrible, but it was also just bonkers,
I
and
did not see
in a
that.
way that I couldn't even begin to describe it. I mean, they were just doing a normal backstage segment,
Mhm.
Chris Jericho and MJF, and,
Oh,
they're
sure, of
just
course,
like,
with those two, yeah.
yeah, they're just talking to each other, and they were, like, mad at each other, and then just boom, the back wall just blows open, and there are dancers, in a ballroom, and you're like, are MJF and Chris Jericho excellent ballroom dancers? They are not. Are they excellent singers? They are not. Was the writing a little chintzy? Sure. It was Me and My Shadow, and they, like, replaced all of the lyrics, talking about, various wrestlers and whatnot like that.
Okay.
And so, like, from a purely creative or theatrical standpoint, you'd be like, well, that's not real great. In terms of professional wrestling, who who has ever it got a write-up in the New York Times, for God's sakes.
Yeah,
It
why
is
would there be a musical number in a wrestling show ever?
exactly, and they did it, and, I mean, one of the things that's so amazing about professional wrestling is that there's so much chutzpah on screen every
Mhm,
single week. One
mhm.
of the great things about, like, I've always been a fan of the bad guys. Part of the reason for that is because it's in many respects, like, pure id. Like, you can do whatever you want. If you didn't have, if you didn't feel like, oh, I feel like that would be stupid, or I feel like that would be bad. I don't want people to think bad about me. Like, these characters are, like, doing things that you would never do in real life.
Right.
For example, having a goddamn musical number in the middle of a show. Well, I think it's safe to say that has never happened in a wrestling show before, and you know what? They did it because they sort of gave them that leeway, and that kind of creative freedom is pretty impressive.
Yeah, yeah, and, when you said it was Chris Jericho, like, of course, right? The guy, like, first of all, the guy's in a rock band, a
Yeah,
fairly successful rock band.
yeah.
So, okay, he's got the musical talent and the vocal chops to do a musical number.
Mhm.
Again, I didn't see the segment, but, like,
I
I can
wouldn't
imagine that
I wouldn't
it wouldn't be
expect that
terrible.
he would be going Rat Pack style. I don't
No,
know that
no.
60s lounge singer is quite his métier, but you know what? Like, the fact that they did it was
Right,
already enough.
right. Well, and
Already.
then Jericho in his last WWE run, like, this is the guy that got over a scarf, right? He got the fans
Yeah.
to cheer and boo for a scarf. He got over, you know, "You just made the list!" Right? And
Mhm.
writing people's name down on a piece of paper. The dude
Yeah.
got over the word "it." right? Like, he had a whole thing where he was like, "You know what you're gonna get? You're gonna get it." And got it to the point where people were losing their minds,
Yeah.
over the word "it," right? Like,
Mhm.
so, yeah, when you tell me that's the guy that's doing a musical number out of nowhere, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
that tracks.
And yeah,
I'm on
when I
board
say
with
there are
that.
like 4 or 5 shows in AEW, Jericho
Mhm.
is a show unto himself.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And even and in fact, most of the time when there is a segment, like he'll pitch a segment for next week and be like, and next week we're gonna do X. I'm like, why would you do that? That is dumb. There's nobody talks like that in real life. That is
Uh-huh.
not like there's this wrestler over here who's like talking as if he were, in a bar and about to knock your head off. And I
Mhm.
feel that and I believe that from this person. And he's like, yeah, and we're gonna have a hot tub match. I'm like, what? That no, that's just why are you even? I am offended that you would do that and that I have spent my time watching. And then next week comes along, I'm like, yeah, that was pretty good. I
Yeah.
don't know what to say. I don't
Yeah.
want to like this, but it was a lot of fun and like I mean, that's all it is at the end of the day. It's just fun. You want to have
I
fun,
mean, yeah.
watch professional wrestling.
At the end of the day, it's a TV show like any other TV show, right?
Yeah.
Except it's live and you can go to it. So,
Yeah.
you're not gonna be on the set of Game of Thrones or Breaking Bad or anything, right? Like,
I have been on the set of
I mean,
Game of
okay,
I've been
okay,
on sets.
but you
Mr.
but you
Hollywood
would.
here. I'm
Yeah,
flapping my
yeah.
lapels.
Listen,
Oh.
you're not gonna show up to the Game of Thrones set holding up "Let's go Daenerys" sign or anything.
You really ought to though.
I mean,
Um
if you get that chance.
also if anyone listening gets to LA, go watch a taping of Let's Make a Deal.
Yeah.
To a lesser extent, Price is Right, but like some of that stuff is it is real fun, like in a way that you couldn't imagine
Hmm.
just watching on TV.
I mean, last time I went to LA was last Thanksgiving. I went to visit some family. I tried to get on a podcast, but apparently I got hot shotted by a bunch of hosts. So
Sorry. You come back when you get more Instagram followers.
oh
We got a
yeah,
standard to maintain.
yeah. Well, they have gone up. I've gotten probably 5 or 6 more Instagram followers since last year. So
That's probably more than we have. I haven't checked.
yeah, fair enough. Okay, so Chan, who
Yes.
would you say? I mean, you mentioned Ricky Steamboat being like your first guy, but if you had to pick one guy or lady to be your all time favorite wrestler, who would that be?
Well, yeah, and yeah, like Ricky Steamboat he probably was my first great love.
Hmm.
Roddy
Hmm.
Roddy Piper again was like
Oh,
someone that I
sure.
was just like,
Right.
oh my god, they're so amazing. Oh gosh, there's a lot of great people that I've been a fan of, but the number one for me, like in terms of like hero status and like icons, and I want to be like you someday when I grow up, is
Hmm.
Mick Foley.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
He's a guy who's just full of passion
Yeah.
for the business and life in general. He's this
Yeah.
hulking guy who just looks like a train wreck. Uh, but like one of his favorite things is Christmas time and
Mhm.
and
Dressing up as Santa Claus.
being Santa.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he does like all kinds of charity work. He's been like a does charity work for like Rain and has for 20 or plus years.
Hmm. Hmm.
And the thing that like I was always a fan of him. I had been a fan of him when I watched wrestling in the 80s, dropped
Sure.
off,
Right.
started watching again in the late 90s when, the Attitude Era was a thing.
Sure. Okay.
And like,
Okay.
I'm like, what is this dude? Mankind is the character. And
Hmm.
he was wearing like a weird leather gimp mask and he just sort of like limps to the ring and like, what's happening? But like the promos he would cut were just amazing.
Yeah.
And the stuff he would do in the ring, like, it was about commitment. You could see like every single move he made was committing to the craft and to the art of professional wrestling.
Yeah. I would agree.
There's some people that are just like naturally gifted, like Dwayne Johnson, The Rock. Like he exuded this energy that you
Hmm.
could feel. But like Mick Foley always just felt like he was busting his ass and like he had none of the gifts. He didn't look like a wrestler, a
No,
roided out guy.
Mick Foley looked like your guy, your friend's dad that was trying to still be cool.
Yeah, yeah. but
Like,
but
and I don't
he
mean that insultingly. Like that's just
no,
that is a look that people have, and Mick Foley fits into that. I mean, he looks like a
yeah.
he also kind of looks like a teddy bear that you had as a kid that you still have. Like he's all beat up, he's missing teeth. Half of his ear is missing from playing too hard, essentially.
Hmm. And then, I mean, at the base of that, he's got these comedy chops that
Yeah,
are
yeah,
impressive. And he started playing this character, Mankind. Then he started playing Dude Love, which was this character that he had created, like in his teenage years. He was like, I'm gonna someday be like this super cool, like good looking, hotshot wrestler.
all the girls are gonna love me, and all the guys are gonna be afraid of me.
Yeah.
Dude,
So he
love.
starts dressing like that and playing this other character, which at the time, like we're starting to play fast and loose with what they call kayfabe. Like
Right,
people started admitting like, okay, this is a show. It's not
right,
real.
right.
But then, then he comes out with a third character, Cactus Jack, who was a character that he had played sort of on the indies in the
Mhm.
hardcore matches in like Japanese death matches where there's barbed wire, where
Yeah,
there are explosives in the ring, where they're
yeah,
shattering fluorescent light bulbs over each other, like crazy banana stuff. And then, so like there's all of this happening. And then there's Hell in the Cell with the Undertaker,
yeah,
and they
yeah.
climb up
Boy.
this cage that's 20 feet off the ground,
Mhm.
and like we're sitting there watching this like, that's bananas. Okay, well, let's see where this goes. And like 2 minutes in, Undertaker throws him off the cage, he just goes flying, smashes through a desk, and we're just like, what? Oh
Yeah,
my god. Like
yeah.
I think it's most people sort of understand that, you're like, yes, okay, wrestling is fake, but there's a possibility of injury. In fact, wrestlers get injured often, and most
Yeah,
of the time are wrestling injured, because
yeah.
even when you're real good at this, you're still like slamming your body into plywood, 2-inch thick plywood, just multiple times a night.
Right, with, like,
And
a thin
you're
layer of padding over it, yeah,
yeah, you're working
yeah,
250, 300 days a year, so like imagine if if your 9 to 5 job was sort of like slamming yourself into the wall repeatedly, like you're going to get
mhm,
these nagging injuries that build up, and, concussions, just endless concussions and stuff. So, like when he throws him off the cage, like there's no special effect to that. You just see
no,
a man falling 20 feet onto a table,
yeah,
which is made of wood, and the table breaks his fall. Like that's the soft thing that he's landing on
right,
is, a
and then
hardwood table.
through the table onto a concrete floor.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I believe the padding stopped before it hit the table, so there was
Mhm.
no pad, and even if there was, what's an inch of padding gonna do on that concrete floor from that height,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
go
no,
ahead and like find climb up to the second story of a building, or like on the roof of a 2-story building, and sort of look down and say like, would I be willing to jump off that for my art? And like that is what cemented it for me, is that like Mick Foley loves his art so much that he's willing to do that to himself.
mhm,
And just like that is what I want to do with my life, is I want to be able to commit that much to the thing that I love.
okay, okay. Okay, not jumping off cages, not getting thrown through the cage, not oh boy, not even
Here's the thing. There are pictures in existence of me jumping off things. There may have been a flaming table and ladders involved in a backyard, maybe. I'm not saying for
I
sure,
mean,
but I definitely have those pictures of myself
I
as a stupid young kid.
I don't know if you know this about me, but I do have a surgically repaired left ACL, thanks to some backyard shenanigans. So,
Good
you know,
man.
yeah, yeah. Okay, okay. So Mick Foley is the person you would want to aspire to as a wrestler. But as far as the not to degrade everything you just said because it was great, but who would be your favorite wrestler, taking all the personality of it aside, just the in-ring action? Who's your favorite guy to watch that way?
Oh gosh, I really should have stopped and thought about this before coming on, because it seems like a fairly basic question that you should know. It's, certainly, one of my all-time favorites is Tajiri.
Okay.
He was a Yoshihiro Tajiri was
Yeah.
a Japanese wrestler, and
Yeah.
also in the WWE in the late 80s. He was in ECW.
Mhm.
ECW was an amazing promotion that had an outsized influence on the business.
It really did. Yeah. Yeah.
Arguably the reason why the Attitude Era became a thing and then became the biggest thing. It was just like a
Yeah.
scrappy little, fed that wrestled out of a bingo hall, and it was mostly the storytelling. The guy who ran it, Paul
Okay.
Heyman, is a genius. Like, he understands wrestling
Yeah.
and how to get people to buy into things, and so he just did this. He just sort of like made it cool, like this extreme thing that, like the aesthetic was like very, very terrible late 90s, like chung chung
Yeah.
chung chung raw. But at the base of it, like, he understood how to get people emotionally invested in things, and then let these wrestlers who, didn't work this cartoony WWE style do their thing. And some of them were like luchadors from Mexico, and
Yeah.
some of them came from Japan, where they work a sort of a worked shoot style that is intended not to look like, ballet or, gymnastics. It's intended to look like I am punching you legitimately really hard.
Mhm.
And the way they accomplish that many times is by legitimately punching someone real hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, Tajiri had this really amazing combination of things that looked like they hurt, and also like some silly gymnastic stuff that was just
Okay.
super
Yeah.
fun to watch.
Yeah.
And didn't speak much English, but
He didn't have to, though.
no, he was great.
Yeah.
Speaking of Asuka, currently,
Yeah.
I was real sad that we had to stop watching WWE. It was at the point where basically, like, Vince McMahon has done so many horrible things.
Yeah.
He and Donald Trump get along because they're both cut out of the same cloth.
Right.
Arguably,
I don't want to not to get into a big political thing, but like, there are certain types of people in the world, and those types of people tend to end up running in the same circles.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, he's done a lot of bad things over the years, and a lot of it is just sort of built up. And it got to the point where, when they bribed the state of Florida to allow them to continue to film their shows as quarantine was locking everything down, I was like,
Mhm.
nope, I'm out. I cannot take another, all of the shows in Saudi Arabia where they're getting paid $10 million to sort of paper over all of the human rights abuses,
Yeah.
and like all of
Yeah.
the union busting they do, all the horrible, like, contractually now, the things they're doing to their wrestlers. Like, they're
Yeah.
taking away a lot of the wrestlers have like Twitches, and
Yeah.
and social media outlets where, like, they can actually make some money, because
Right.
WWE pays a lot, but not to everybody, not in the same way. And, like, man, if you can make money doing Twitch, why wouldn't you? But
Right.
WWE took it away and still tries to call them independent contractors, so they don't have
Yeah.
to pay for benefits.
Yeah, see, that's if it's either your guys are independent contractors or they're not. Like, make up
Mhm.
your mind, because if someone's an independent contractor, great. That means that they have to do is show up. They have to show up, and the thing you ask them to do has to get done, right?
Yeah.
And under true independent contracting, it doesn't even have to be that person who does it, right? Now,
Mhm.
professional wrestling is it's a performance thing, right? So like, yeah, okay, it has if we're gonna advertise, X wrestler is gonna be here, then like this wrestler has to show up, right? You can't just be like, well, we said that I don't know, AJ Styles is gonna show up, and instead we get the Brooklyn Brawler, right?
No.
Like, yeah, that's that okay. But
Let's not say
no, no,
mean
no.
things about Steve Lombardi. He's a great guy.
Yeah,
Decent
I mean,
wrestler. Okay,
I
not a
I
decent wrestler. I'm
I
sure
mean,
he's a good person.
I would like to believe they're all good people. I know that many of them are
Mm,
not.
yeah.
Uh, I will say that in my, any interactions I've had with wrestlers have mostly been positive. So,
Yeah.
we'll go with that. Including AJ Styles, as a matter of fact.
Oh,
He
that's
was
good.
kind enough when I met him when he was still in TNA. There's a photo of me with the TNA championship that he was holding at
Oh,
the time. So, that was pretty neat.
yeah. He seems like a decent guy. Teresa loves
Yeah.
AJ Styles, so I'd
Okay.
I'd
Yeah.
hate to hear that he was a mean person.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, who knows? as you said, these people are running around and falling down on a piece of plywood over and over again.
Yeah,
There any individual fan interaction, either right before, or right after that, who knows what kind of mood they're in, psyching
exactly.
themselves up for that, or having just gone through it.
Hmm.
So, uh, where was I going? Oh, independent contracting, right.
Hmm.
So, like, the thing about, like, I've been an independent contractor before, right? I'm a graphic designer. There have been plenty of times, like, none of the people that have hired me to do graphics for them have ever said, "Oh, by the way, you can't do anything else to make money from any other person," right? Because at
Yep.
that point, you're an employee.
Yep.
So, make up your
Uh,
mind.
yeah,
Are they
and
independent contractors or are they your employees? And if they're your employees, then pay them as such.
the unfortunate thing is that the entire pro wrestling pro wrestling came from carnivals where
Right.
the idea was that they were going to dupe you out of your money.
Right.
They would do a thing where they would just come into town and be like, if you can beat this guy, we'll give you $100 or whatever. And then they would have someone working with them to be like, oh, go in and beat this guy for you and like do it. And then, you know, the yokels will be like, oh yeah, well, if that guy could do it, I could totally do it. And then they would, get twisted up. And
Right.
that was the game. So like, yeah, it started out as just nothing but lies. So the fact that it's still like that and they're still manipulating and being terrible, it kind of makes sense. But
Yeah, I guess we
also,
can't be terribly surprised.
yeah, it's 2020. There's a 20-point test for if someone is an independent contractor or an employee.
Mhm.
And I believe WWE fails at 17 of those 20. So there's
I think,
no
yeah.
doubt that they're independent contractors. And yeah, like I said, they've been busting unions forever. They've
Right.
created a culture where if anybody talks about a union, they get shut down by the other wrestlers because
Yeah.
everybody's afraid that they'll never work again.
Right.
And it's
Right.
real sad and disappointing. All of which say is that Vince McMahon is terrible. I feel bad for the WWE wrestlers. In general, wrestling is a real tough gig for everybody. So,
Yeah.
just a
Yeah.
blanket. I feel for you all. Thank you for Thank you for your service.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and part of it is prior to the last 20 years, we didn't have access to as much background stuff on the business as we've had, right?
Hmm.
So, hey, 80s and 90s, yeah, we didn't know that this stuff was going on, right? We did, we saw the TV show, right? And that's what we watched, and we liked our guys, and we didn't like some guys, and that was it. Uh
Hmm.
Guys and girls, I apologize. Wrestling has been so male dominated.
Did I mention Asuka? I feel like I was
You
going to
did.
mention Asuka and I got
You did mention
distracted.
Asuka.
Uh,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
so good.
Yeah, so, okay, let's go back to, you said, Tajiri was one of your favorite in-ring performers, and then Asuka, but then you were sad you had to stop watching WWE. So let's go back to Asuka.
Yeah, that was my point. um, Watching Asuka is just a masterclass in, I guess I would say, the art of professional wrestling because she speaks so little English. Like the writers will sometimes string together, a dozen words in a row for her to say, on camera, but for the
Right.
most part, she is just this spectacle. Like the music plays and she swoops onto stage in this amazing getup that is just like full of streamers and fur and glitter and just the most amazing stuff. She wears this I I think it's a Japanese no mask, maybe possibly
I
a
think so, yeah.
kabuki.
Yeah.
Hard to, I don't know, but it's terrifying. And she takes the mask off and she's smiling like a maniac, an insane human being, and just astonishing that she conveys so much from the first moment you see her down to the ring, through her in-ring work, the stuff
Mhm.
she does, like looks like it hurts, it conveys emotion, it tells stories. That's another that's kind of like, I joke and say it's about, sweaty men punching each other, but in essence every match is a story.
Right.
And you can break it down. Like here's the baby face who, comes out, is a paragon of humanity and whatnot, and he gets beaten down by this evil villain heel. And then, he starts to come back, then he gets beaten down again. Then, the villain cheats to, knock him back down again. But then he makes this comeback, and in the end, good stands triumphant. That is almost every wrestling match, except for in a longer story arc where it's sort of broken up over many matches, where the hero keeps getting beat down, and he finally, at the very end of this, of a months long story arc, beats the bad guy, and you feel your heart is full, and and to do that without basically being able to say a word is so impressive. Especially, well, I mean, to be fair, every country is a little bit or a lot bit racist. So, saying that, like, a country like the United States that does not care for foreigners as a general rule, to have someone get over like that is pretty amazing.
Yeah, well, and not even the United States, but I mean, if you look at the history, the track record of WWE, just look at the list of champions.
Yeah.
Any championship that they've had, look at most of them. You can kind of tell, yeah, it's a pretty USA centric promotion.
And there's a
Um, but
few
there are a
times
few,
when evil foreigners have won the belt,
right?
uh, and hold it for a little while to eventually be reclaimed by your white blonde champion.
Right, right. I mean, Iron Sheik being the most obvious example, but
Mhm.
when I started watching, my the thing that got me watching wrestling was when Yokozuna beat Bret Hart for the world title at WrestleMania 9.
Yeah.
Um, I'd watched wrestling before, right? But
Hmm.
it was just my friends had it on, or I was over at a cousin's house or whatever, and like we'd watch, in the squash matches on Superstars and Wrestling Challenge and stuff, and
Hmm.
but it was the morning after WrestleMania 9. All my friends that I used to walk to school with were like, "Did you see WrestleMania last night?" And I was like, "No, what happened?" And they told me this
Hmm.
amazing story about how Yokozuna, the evil, Japanese, in real life Samoan, but we didn't know, Japanese sumo wrestler came in and fought Bret the Hitman Hart, the world champion, and beat him because Yokozuna's manager threw salt in Bret Hart's eyes.
Ah, Mr.
And
Fuji. Oh,
yeah,
rest in
yeah,
peace, my friend. Oh, he was a
yeah.
magical man.
Um, and then Hulk Hogan came out to help Bret to the back of the ring, or from the ring to the backstage, and Mr.
Mhm.
Fuji challenged Hulk Hogan. Hogan accepted, and when Mr. Fuji went to throw salt in Hulk Hogan's eyes, he instead hit Yokozuna in the face with the salt. And
Oh.
so Hogan ended up hitting his leg drop finisher, and 1, 2, 3 won the world championship. That story, and they told it a little better, and it's a 40-minute end of WrestleMania, but
Sure.
like that whole thing was the coolest good versus evil comeuppance story I had heard. I would have been this is 1993, right? So however old, 9, 10 years old, whatever.
Mhm.
It was the coolest thing, and I was like, okay, well, I know wrestling's on Monday nights, and it's Monday, so I started watching Monday Night Raw basically right after that. And
There you
yeah, like
go.
you said, right? It's especially the early '90s, right, where everyone had this super over the top cartoony character, right? You had your race car drivers and your garbage men and your Mounties and your Hawaiian guy
Oh,
named Crush who
Jesus.
wore neon orange.
I just
Uh,
remembered Sparkplug Bob Holly. When you
oh
mentioned
yeah,
race car driver, I was like, "Oh, Bob Holly."
oh yeah.
Oh.
And so that's why I'll never like I can't even though some of the stuff at WWE isn't to my taste, I can't dump on all of the cartoony things they do because that's the stuff that drew me in.
Yeah.
And as I got older, Bret Hart would be my favorite in-ring performer because everything he does looks like he's trying to kill somebody.
Yeah.
And according to basically everyone he's ever worked with, he never actually hurt them.
Yeah.
So
That was his rep. Was
yeah, yeah, and Bret has his real life demons and whatever, but like when you're just talking the character on the show, like, hey
Mhm.
man, no one better. And I was just I was enamored.
Mhm.
And a couple months later, Yokozuna beat Hogan for the title, and that whole rest of 1993 up through WrestleMania 10, yeah, your evil foreigner heel was the champion, waiting for the next, blonde babyface to overtake him, and Lex Luger couldn't get the job done. And then WrestleMania 10 ends with Bret Hart getting his title back, and it was like, this is perfect. Like this is the perfect end to this. I don't know that I've ever liked wrestling as much as I did in '93 and '94, but I have not really stopped watching.
At its best, there's almost nothing that can compete with it just because it's so primal.
Yeah.
Like the first stories that are being told, around a campfire, by, Neanderthals or, whatever, or, like tales of battle. Like
Yeah.
look here's how I took down that giant mammoth. I grabbed him like this and did this, and the struggle against good and dinner, I guess. But like it
I mean, the struggle
really,
for survival. Yeah.
yeah, it touches something deep down inside of you. And even if you're like, ugh, what is this? This man is wearing spandex. What am I even? When it's done right, it just touches you in a way that, like nothing else can.
Yeah. I wear my wrestling fandom on my sleeve. I mean, literally right now I'm wearing a Kane shirt.
Nice. It's
But I remember
Kane.
I remember one time talking with a friend who knew I liked wrestling, but she never watched. And she and her boyfriend were flipping through channels, and they came on, I don't know, Raw or SmackDown or whatever. And just the 30 seconds that they watched, she got so into it that when they went to flip to the next channel, she was like, I didn't want to, I didn't care enough to go back, but I kind of wanted to see who was going to win the fight. And I have no idea, like, she didn't know who any of the wrestlers were, so I don't know what match this was. I don't know what, but like, whatever it was, there was 20, 30 seconds or whatever that was just interesting enough to get this, young lady to care about who was going to win this fight. And
Mhm.
I sometimes wonder what would have happened to her wrestling. Like, would she have become a fan had she had the opportunity to continue watching that match? I
Oh,
mean, we'll never know,
so close.
but
So close.
yeah. Yeah. Man, I would love to keep doing this, but we are a little bit over time. So, Chan, where okay, so in addition to your two podcasts, give us their name and your contact info where people can find you and more of your wrestling talk.
There's Knowing is Half the Podcast, where we watch old cartoons and, yeah, just talk about the good and the bad, what ages, what maybe should be left behind. It's a lot of fun with Ray Stacanis and Gina Ippolito. Yeah, find that wherever podcasts are sold. There's AE Doubleback, which is, yeah, the AEW Dynamite recap podcast. We just watch a show and then, right afterwards we talk about it. And it's me and Teresa Gumprecht and Calder Holbrook. And that is also a fantastic show. You can find me online at 999 RPMs. Sometimes I tweet on Facebook, I guess. You try that. I'm pretty public.
Yeah.
That's kind of it.
Cool, man. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. I had a blast.
Thank you for having me. This is a delight.
Yeah, I would love to talk wrestling with you more. So we'll have to
I'm always around.
Okay. Yeah. Cool, man. Well, and everyone else, if you, I mean, I've made it clear that Atomic Monsoon's ending with episode 100, so you just got a few left. Find us on social media at Atomic Monsoon on Facebook and Twitter, the underscore between the words on Instagram, and email us atomicmonsoon@gmail.com. And please let us know your favorite Atomic Monsoon moments, because that's what we're doing in our last episode, is talking about the best of Atomic Monsoon. All right, everyone, have a great week and stay safe.
Bye.